You're very welcome to our talk today. We've got a very special session. It's going to be a nice kind of practical session to see how you can put universal design for learning into practice. So we hope it's going to be really useful for everybody. So just a quick introduction to the Trinity-INC project, just in case you're not familiar with it. The project is, I'm the project director. My name is Rachel Hoare. Davina Johnson is the manager, and then we've got Sean as well with us, Sean Adderley, who's our student partner liaison person. So you're very welcome today. We started in October 2020. And our mandate is to embed principles of diversity, equality and inclusion across all curricula at Trinity College Dublin. And we do that through 4 pillars. We work in collaboration and partnership across college to achieve our goals. So the academic pillar, the objective is to create an inclusive curriculum community of practice together with our Trinity-INC school champions. If anyone's interested in becoming a champion for their school, if they don't already have one, please get in touch with us. Student pillar, to raise awareness of inclusion challenges and successes and to support the recreation of curricular components together with our Trinity-INC Student Partners. We're going to hear from 2 of them today. Institutional pillar is to try and embed inclusivity into college policies and discourse related to curricular development, which will last well beyond the lifetime of the project. And then the infrastructure is all about supporting capacity across college to further inclusive teaching and learning practices and to meet the support needs of all our students. So those are just for those of you who are not familiar with the project, that's kind of the project in a nutshell. So without, actually, yes, we also want to just make everybody aware that we've got a professional learning module in teaching and learning, which is open to everybody in college. This draws on the Universal Design for Learning framework, which we're going to hear more about today, and it's tailored to the Trinity context. Participants are also eligible to receive the National Forum for Teaching and Learning Ahead /UCD digital badge in Universal Design for Learning. It's 20 hours a week, 8 weeks, 2 hours a week roughly. It's very, very flexible design. So it's webinars, peer group and self-directed learning. We have a new rollout starting on April the 20th. So if you want to find out more, please get in touch with the project directly, or you can go on to that link there in the slide. The feedback we had from 2021 in the pilot rollout, the program was very well organised, structured and planned. We enjoyed both the self-directed elements and the webinars, and particularly benefited from working together and sharing ideas in our quad. So the quad consisted of 4 colleagues across different disciplines in Trinity who were sharing lots of ideas about their teaching and learning. We were deeply struck by how big a difference can be made by applying small changes. Very important. Thank you. Thanks, Serena. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Jean Reale. Jean is an academic developer. Sorry.
We're going to hear first from our student partner.
Okay, sorry. Student partners, go ahead. I'm going to introduce you to Emer and Alice, 2 of our student partners on the project. Thank you. Who's going first?
So first we're going to hear from Emer McDwyer. So you work away on sharing your slides there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Hopefully I can get this good to go. If everyone can see that. Yeah, great. Okay, so hi, everyone. My name is Emer. I am a final year political science and geography student. I got involved in Trinity-INC through the Trinity Access program. I've been an ambassador with the Trinity Access program since my first year in college. So I would typically qualify as a student from a socioeconomically disadvantaged background. So both the Trinity Access program and Trinity-INC have been a great help to me throughout my time in college. Last summer, I created a zine that highlighted what UDL principles are most important for me as a student. So first, I'll talk about the importance of feedback. I think that a strengthening in channels of communication would be beneficial for students and staff in Trinity. Feedback is so important, so if there are any questions or concerns that staff or students might have, by having immediate and effective communication channels open means that any changes can be made immediately. This should help to improve the learning environment for everyone. So another area I think would be really important to focus on is allowing for greater freedom and option around assignments. I feel that providing students with alternative assignment options such as open-ended essay questions, podcasts, video productions, PowerPoints, blog posts, rather than the standard essay option could be beneficial for students. I would also like to see students being given freedom in to shape and structure their assignments to their own interests. So, for example, I took a class on French history and society while on Erasmus, and I was allowed to choose the topic of my final assignment. And on that, I chose to present on the role of fashion and its contributions to gender constructions in French society. And I found that it was much more enjoyable researching and working on an assignment in this way. So to sum, I am really happy to be here today to continue learning about inclusive materials and practices that are available for all staff and students. I'm also happy to be learning more about the UDL framework. I now have a greater appreciation for how beneficial and impactful these supports can be for students and staff alike. So I'm delighted to be here to continue learning. So thank you very much, and I will stop sharing now if I can manage it.
Many thanks, Emer. That's giving us some great insights into the student experience. And Emer is a very valued member of our student partners, so thank you. So we move on to Alice now. Alice, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Alice, and I'm a senior sophomore or final year studying English studies. So I'm here today to talk to you about what inclusive learning and teaching practices such as UDL mean to me and other Trinity students. As some of you may know from previous Trinity-INC sessions, I'm visually impaired. I have convergence insufficiency, which essentially means that my eyes refuse to work together. It's very rude of them, they just won't. And it causes constant double or multi-vision, photosensitivity, visual exhaustion, and migraines. I'd like just to take a moment to acknowledge the steps that Trinity is taking to embed inclusive teaching and learning in our curricula. I know that many of you on this call are responsible for championing this, and I want to thank you on behalf of myself and my fellow students. When we encounter inclusive teaching and learning practices, it makes such a difference to our studies. For example, I discovered Blackboard Ally this year, and it's wonderful to be able to convert extensive visual material into an audio format. From working with other student partners, I've also seen and heard how much they appreciate inclusive teaching practices or can feel alienated when curricula are not designed with accessibility at the fore. I've been particularly struck by instances when my fellow students have felt alienated because they haven't seen their gender identity, sexual orientation, or cultural background reflected in or acknowledged by course content. Dorina actually highlighted to me last week as we were discussing the session today that some students in the health sciences had brought to her attention that in some courses, examples of skin conditions were only given on white skin, meaning that students wouldn't learn how to recognize them on darker skin. I think this example really emphasizes to us just how essential the practice of inclusive teaching and learning is. These practices benefit all students, not just those from a particular background, those who express a particular identity, or those like me who disclose a physical disability to the college. I'd just like to dwell on this notion of disclosure before I hand over to Jean Reale. So much of what I've learned about others' educational needs comes from them being willing to disclose them with me and from them realizing themselves that they deserve to have these needs met. Many students don't feel comfortable, though, with disclosure or do not realize that they'd be eligible for supports from college. For example, I had a friend with dyslexia who didn't realize that he could register with the disability service until second year. Inclusive teaching practices like UDL can mean that students like my friend never have to disclose during their educational journeys if this would be a source of anxiety for them. I mean, somebody shouldn't have to disclose any part of their identity if we're being adequately and extensively inclusive in our practices. So I'd like to encourage you all to continue to champion inclusive teaching practices or to go further on your inclusive teaching journey in order to benefit all students, not just those who have applied for retroactive supports. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Alice. And again, Alice has been a member of our student partners, been a student partner from the very beginning and brought many insights to the project. So thank you so much for articulating that so well. I'm going to hand over now to Jean. Jean Reale is an academic developer at Reale College in Limerick and a PhD researcher at the School of Education here in Trinity. She has over 25 years experience working in technology-enhanced teaching and learning in both the public and private sectors, with a specific focus on creating inclusive learning environments. She provides a wide range of professional development supports to teachers across Ireland to develop UDL environments for all learners. Her PhD explores the design, development and implementation of universal design for learning across all sectors of the Irish education system. She also currently leads a research project to design and develop a UDL roadmap for Irish schools and further education and training centres to support a lifelong learning approach to implementing UDL. So we're absolutely delighted to welcome Jean, and I'll hand over to you now. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Rachel. I'm just going to share my PowerPoint there with you. That should be loading now any second. So it was really, really important to hear the student voice at the start of this session, because the one thing that I'm going to say to you from the outset is that UDL is not something that we do to or for our students. UDL is something that we do with our students. It's really important for us to understand who it is we are trying to communicate with. And the only way we can do that is by giving opportunities for our students to have their voices heard. Now, I created this initial slide just to represent where we've been for the last 2 years. We have the traditional image of our campus in the background, but how we've actually accessed our campus has been very, very different. Now, some of us will say it's been good, some of us will say it's been bad, but I think the overall thing is it's been a mixed bag. But what it's done is, I wouldn't recommend a pandemic to upskill in IT skills, but it has actually happened as part of it. But what it's done is it's opened up our access opportunities. And what we need to do is we get very familiar with the environment that we're in, and we become comfortable with the environment that we're in, and we feel that we're being as inclusive as we can within that environment. But actually what we need to do is we need to take a step back, and we need to look at our comfort zones and look at what opportunities we have to use inbuilt inclusivity. And at that end, what I'm going to do is just have a quick review of the space that we're currently in. Now, I know a lot of you use Zoom, but a lot of you will use Teams as well. So what I want to just say to you is here, it's about knowing the environment you're in and knowing what's available to you as the educator and to your students. So if you look to the top of the screen, there's a more button with 3 dots in it. If you click that and you come down, there are live subtitles there for you. So if you come down along, you should see live captioning. Now, when you turn on live captioning here, you were turning it on for yourself. So what the system is allowing you to do is it's allowing you to self-support. And for me as the educator, it's allowing me to say, okay, I know those supports are inbuilt, but when I look at the supports that are inbuilt, I have to look at how do they affect the person that's using it. And traditionally, we would have said we use live captioning for somebody who is deaf or has a hearing impairment. But in actual fact, if we look at live captioning, we say it will support students or anybody who's on the call who's in a less than optimal environment. So if there's a lot of noise going on in the background, if you're traveling, you now have access to the text to go with the sound. If you have a student whose English isn't a first language, you now also have the text support to go with that. So suddenly, by just saying to you all, there's an option there for live captioning, you can now decide for yourself how to self-support. And this is what we want to do here within a UDL environment. It's not about me as the teacher saying, this is how it works and this is what I'm giving you and these are the supports you need. It's about me looking at what supports are available and offering them to you to use in a way that's meaningful to you. And the last thing that I'll just show you in this environment as well is that under the slide, there's another 3 dots. And if you click on those 3 dots, it will allow you to translate the slide into whatever language is appropriate to yourself. And any text that I have typed on the slide will automatically be translated. And also there's an option for high contrast as well, if that supports somebody visually. Okay, so now we've established where we are. What we want to do quickly through the session today is, and I'm conscious of the time, is that we want to look at unpacking the principles. This is more to look at what does UDL mean to us rather than breaking down the framework. So it's about you looking at your current practice, looking at where UDL is already established, and looking at how we can develop it further. So that's really what I want to do. Now, the resources that we sent out to you, hopefully everybody has gotten a copy of them. What I did with it was I put 3 resources at the top about what is UDL, so you can go and look at those in your own time. Now, everything that I'm going to reference today is also available on the last slides with links, so don't worry about taking notes or whatever. And we're also recording with the transcript. Now, another thing around that is when we're recording with the transcript, for a student who needs to really concentrate on what's going on there and then in the session, the knowledge that there are a set of notes being created for you is really, really useful. And then they can go back and they can use those notes and they can adapt them in a way that suits themselves. But again, it's about just saying, what else can I do? So all I've done so far in this to make it completely accessible is I've told you to look at the live captioning, I've told you to look at translate, and I've turned on the recording, and that's it. And that has created a huge amount of inclusivity. So what we did was when we looked at the resources as well, I wanted to ensure that we were capturing teachers, students, and support services within this, because we're going to take it takes a village approach for UDL. UDL is not something that you do on your own. UDL to be effective needs to be cross-curricular, it needs to be cross-campus, it needs to be institutional. So if you were to say to me, what is UDL, Jean? In a nutshell, what is it? UDL is not something new. It's not a fad. It's not something else you have to do. Universal Design for Learning, I like to say, is the piece of the inclusive puzzle that brings all good practice together. And we are all participating in good practice. The thing is, we're not naming it. And what the UDL framework allows you to do is it allows you to map that practice. And when you map and you name, you can then identify areas where you need to improve. But what we need to do here is UDL needs to be embedded across all faculties as support services to ensure that it's a truly inclusive experience for all. You can't have a UDL experience in one module and not in the next. That just creates confusion. One of the best descriptions of UDL I have ever had, and anyone who comes to any of my sessions, I use this because for me it is the ultimate. Why use UDL? The founders, David Rose and Anne Myers, just have this brilliant description, which is by using the UDL framework, educators can accept learner variability as a strength to be leveraged, not a challenge to be overcome. And the language here is really, really important. We're not talking about diversity, we're talking about variability. Variability within us all. We all learn differently in different situations, and we need to be able to support ourselves. So rather than trying to identify diversity, we actually are accepting diversity is the norm. How do we leverage it? That's really the angle that we want to come from. So when we look at the framework itself, the framework, I always say it's like when you're building your house and they pour the foundations, you look and think, oh my God, that's really small. And then they put up the walls and it suddenly grows out again. The UDL framework is like that. When we look at the framework itself, it has 3 key principles: multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. Now, when you start working through the framework, it's broken down further then into each principle has 3 goals, and each goal has multiple guidelines. The guidelines and checkpoints are really just to help you to focus in. But when you're working on the actual framework, you don't work down, you work across. So we work from engagement, recruiting interest, and then we look at representation. How is the perception? What is the physical action that we can add to our assessment? So you want to build on those blocks as you're going across. But ultimately, the ultimate goal of UDL, and this is the piece I think a lot of people forget, is that the ultimate goal of UDL is to create expert learners. Now, expert learners are not A students. Expert learners are people who understand how they learn and what they need to learn. Now, we can't create expert learners. You can't make somebody an expert learner, but what you can do is you can create a flexible environment which allows them to develop these skills. And if we can turn out students at the end of their study from all of our institutions that are purposeful and motivated, resourceful and knowledgeable, strategic and goal-directed, we have really, really hit the top mark. And that's what we want to do. So what we want to do when we go back and we look at the framework, as you go through the different sections of it, you will start to see that it is about the student. It is about developing those skills. It's about developing self-regulation. It's about looking at developing the executive functioning skills. And the only way that you can do that is by having voice and choice. It's about giving choice and options to our students, but it's also about hearing what it is they have to say and to see how effective things actually are. So then when we look at, for ourselves as teachers, UDL starts with good teaching design. It's about designing from the beginning. We know if we go back to the analogy of the house, you buy a house, it suits your needs now. Your needs change, you add on an extension. It changes the flow. If it's well designed, it enhances the flow. If it's not, it impedes it. If we then have to go and add on another extension, we're diluting the flow again. So what we actually have to do is we have to step back here and start looking at what is inclusivity. And people start talking about, you know, the cost of inclusivity. Inclusivity is expensive if it hasn't been designed in from the start. It's expensive in time, it's expensive in emotion, it's expensive in resources. So if we start, when we're designing our modules and our programs, and we start from the outset of saying we are designing for the widest possible audience. And I've adapted this quote from Norman, who has it in the Design of Everyday Things. He talks about design and designers. I've changed it to teaching and teachers. So teaching really is an act of communication, which means having a deep understanding of the person with whom the teacher is communicating. How can you have a deep understanding of a person? You have to talk to them. You have to find out what it is they need. You can't design in isolation. And that's why all of our feedback mechanisms that we have are so important. So then when we look at the curriculum design and planning, and this is the piece here that we want to look at, you know, is that UDL isn't down to just the teacher or the lecturer designing their program. We need to look at this from an institutional perspective, whereby we need supports. We cannot be experts in everything. You know, you're the subject matter expert, but you're not the design expert. You know, you're not the tell expert. You need to have these resources within the institution to support. So the very first thing that we need to do is when we look at designing our modules and programs, we need to look at our learning outcomes. It is an art in itself, designing your learning outcomes, but we need to have clear, actionable learning outcomes, so that when we move to step 2 and we look at flexible assessment, we need to look at what is it we're trying to assess. And what we want to do is, and Emer brought it up at the start about the opportunities for different choices in assessment. We tend to talk about alternative assessments. The language here is very important. We're not talking about alternative assessments. We're talking about multiple means of assessment. Because when you start saying, you know, alternative, it sounds in some ways as if it's lesser than the original. And that's not what we want to do. If we have clear learning outcomes, we should be able to design assessments that can be delivered in multiple modes. So when you write your rubric, it doesn't matter whether the assessment is a written assessment, a video, an audio, or a graphical, because we are assessing the same thing. So the other thing that we need to look at here then is that when we're looking at different types of assessment choices, we have to look at what skills are required in order to produce those outcomes. Because one of the things that I constantly say is that, you know, choice without capacity is not choice. If we say to our students suddenly, oh, you can do a video, oh yeah, you can do an audio, if they don't have that skill set, if they don't know what success looks like in those mediums, that's not choice. So what we need to do is when we're designing our learning outcomes, we look at our assessment, we look at what resources are we going to use. So if I'm saying, yes, you can do your assignment as a video or audio, then I have to use those kind of mediums in my teaching so that my students see what good examples of those mediums actually are. And I also need to look at what skill sets do they require. And do they have access to the resources? And this is where we start to think then, you know, as a cross-campus activity, is the ICT infrastructure there? Is the support there for the students to build those skills? Like, for instance, if we have LinkedIn Learning, for instance, if I'm not able to give specific instruction on a task, can I curate a pathway through that and make that part of the learning process as well? So we need to start looking at what resources we have to hand. Again, it's not all about me having to do it all. It's about me looking outwards and saying, right, what is Trinity? What is UL? What is Mary Immaculate? What have any of the other colleges got available to them that I can harness the power of that? So we look at step 3, then you talk about anticipate all learning needs. You can try, but you're not an expert on everybody. So what do? You elicit people's opinions, you elicit people's experiences, and you design for that. You know, I mean, the thing is that what we want to do here through the UDL lens is we want to design out the barriers in the curriculum rather than highlighting people's inability to engage with what we've designed, which puts the emphasis over to them. You know, you can't engage with, therefore I have to do something extra for you. We have to stop that. We have to look at the actual design and say, is it fit for purpose? And in doing that, then we look at the design the learning experience and the environment. And again, as I said to you, this is where we start going, okay, how are we engaging our students? If we go back to the first slide and we look at, we have been engaging our students through our VLEs. How effective are our VLEs? How much design work do we put into the development of our Blackboard pages or our Moodle pages or Canvas pages? Does my student, when they come onto my module, do they get the same experience as they do when they go onto your module? Is there signposting on them for them? You know, Alice talked about using Ally. Do we know as staff that Ally is there? Can we recommend it to our students? How do our students find out about this? If we start designing in a whole module, whole program way, particularly in a whole program way, we can share this information between ourselves. We can come up with a common design. Now, when we come up with a common design for our VLE, it's not about me telling you how you teach or what resources you put up there, but it's about having continuity in how our students engage with that learning experience. So then the last thing that we want to look at here, because I'm conscious of the time as well, is that reflect. We need to take time to step back and reflect on these changes that we're making, but we need to reflect with our students. That student voice again is what, you know, that's where the gold is. That's what we have to look for. And the other thing about UDL as well is UDL is not a destination, it is a journey. UDL is something that we will go through continuously as technologies change, as our campuses change, as our student bodies change. We have to just keep UDL at the front of our minds and look at, you know, are we designing for everybody? Do we have voice and choice? Do we have multiple means of engagement, representation and action and expression? The other thing as well is that, you know, it will look different depending on your discipline. So when you sit down to design, you don't have to go, all right, okay, they all have to have an essay, they all have to have access to video, they all have to have access to audio. They only need to have access to it if it's appropriate to the subject area. There might be a different option, you know, and I can't come in and dictate to you, oh, in your subject area, you should this, because I don't know your subject area. Only you can decide what will work best. The key is that people have that choice so that they can develop their skills. The other thing as well around offering the choice, particularly around the assessment, is that it should never be offered as the summative assessment. First, people have to build up their skills. They have to get comfortable with it. So where possible, you know, in your formative assessment, if you can give opportunities to engage with these different types of things, even if you just went to something simple, like if you use MCQs, you have 10 questions. Get the students to design 3 of those questions. If you're using Blackboard and you're using forums, they shouldn't have to always give a text response. Can they use the audio response in it? Can they drop a video into it? Would you accept it in different ways so people start to become more comfortable with the different options? Just simple little changes that we're giving people an opportunity to experience it. And the other thing as well is that, you know, people will look and they'll say, right, okay, I know how to write an essay, I know how to structure an essay, I know what's needed for that essay. Okay, now if I have to do a video, is it comparable with a written piece? Well, in actual fact, if you look at, if I have to create a video, I actually use the same skill set that I would for a essay. I have to structure it. It has to be researched. It has to be communicated in an effective manner. So when you go back to looking at your assessment, the kinds of things you will have in there, you know, it needs to be well structured. It needs to be well referenced. The argument needs to be, you know, it's exactly the same. I mean, the only difference is that if I was giving it to you in a text versus a video, am I actually assessing your ability to type? I'm not. I'm assessing your ability to express yourself. And even for somebody who came back and said to me, look, and I've heard this a million times, oh no, honestly now, they have to produce a text document at the end. It's the only way. So I say, okay, right, let's kind of unpack that one a little bit. Rather than saying you need to write an essay, simply say you need to produce a text-based assignment, because suddenly it opens it up. I'm now using a word processor, and what's in the word processor? dictate mode. So I'm dictating my assignment. You're getting the output that you so desperately want, but I have the flexibility in how I do that. So small little changes like that in our thinking really can have an impact on how the students engage. So we want to have a little look here now as well at from a whole institutional perspective. Again, I was looking at from the design lens on this when I put together this UDL implementation process model. And the first thing that I looked at was diversity, and this whole area of diversity. What is diversity? You know, if you think about it, if we go back 3 years now and we looked at our students coming through the gates, we could say, oh, you know, with a fair amount of certainty, this student will succeed here because this is an environment that works for them. You know, they know how it works. They've come through leaving certs. They've got the points. You know, they have the means to be here. You know, they have the social groups. We understand that. Then I might be able to identify a student who I think might struggle. Come the pandemic, what happened? Everything was stripped away from us. And those traditional students that we knew would succeed suddenly struggled. Not because they had any issues around their ability to learn, but because they were not in an environment that suited them. And that's the same experience that our diverse students experience every day in the traditional format. And that's something that we really need to look at. So when we look at this, then we need to, as I said, identify what do we mean by diversity. I would go variability rather than diversity. Then we need to look at our educators, and we need to look at, you know, what skill sets do they have? What skill sets do they need? How do we as an institution support them in developing that? The same for our students. We need to look at their current skill sets and what they need going forward, but we also need to give them an opportunity to understand how they as individuals learn and what they need and what their role is in that as well. What responsibility they need to take in that learning environment. So then we need to look at innovations, and we need to look at what's out there. And again, in the last couple of years, you know, there's been a huge push with technology. There's a lot more opportunities now. So we have our traditional face-to-face, we have our blended modes, we have our fully online, we have our our high flex approaches. So there's a lot more opportunity out there. So we need to look and see, but again, we don't have to chase, you know, the biggest, shiniest thing. We need to look at it and see what really suits us. But as institutions, we also need to set goals here. You know, UDL isn't something that you're going to go away and say next Monday, that's it, we're all UDL and it'll be great. We need to have a plan because there are so many moving parts in this. And that whole idea that we need to be inclusive, we need to be inclusive of all the services that we have within our institution to support each other. And then going forward after that, we need to look at the nurture. And it's that idea that it's not a destination, it's a journey. We need to nurture this. We need to keep revisiting it and make sure that we are actually continuing to progress through the UDL framework. So as I said, I'm conscious of the time because I want to give you a chance to have a chat together. I'm going to skip over this slide for a minute because this is what we'll do at the end. I want to, just in case anybody needs to leave before we're finished, I want just to have a quick look at the resources that are there. Okay, so we have resources here. Everything that I've spoken about is linked. Just want to show you this graphic at the end. I like this graphic of reading because we always tend to think of reading in terms of books. But if you set a set piece for your course, and you buy the book and read it, and I get the audio version of it, does that make you well read and me well listened? Or are we both just well informed? We really need to think about that. So I'm going to go back just a step back here. So for you yourself, what next? So as Rachel said at the outset, there is a program available within Trinity. So TCD run the professional learning module, an inclusive practice for teaching and learning. And those who completed are also awarded the UDL digital badge. And this year alone, nationally, there were nearly 1,000 participants from FET and higher education. So you would become part of quite a big movement. Now, for those of you who want to just try something new, there's the +1 model, and that literally is try one thing. Try it, talk about it, see how it goes. And then there's another approach to it, which is the dive into UDL, which again is available in the resources, which I like. It's the wade in, which is where we are at the moment. What's UDL? What's it about? What's everyone else doing? Then there's the shallow swim. I think I might try something. And then there's the deep dive where you've just committed and you have to go for it. So, you know, there's lots of different levels that you have available to you there. So what I want to do now, I'm very conscious that I've spoken quite a bit to you. So what we're going to do is we're going to put you into breakout rooms for 10 minutes. And I want you to just have a chat and come up with a takeaway from today. Just one takeaway that you will consider going forward.
Before I just open the chat, before I open the rooms, does anybody have any question regarding the rooms or what your task is? No? How long will they be in the rooms, Jean?
If we say 10 minutes, that'll give us another 5 to 10 when we come back to have a quick chat.
Great, okay. See you all soon. That was great. Thank you so much. I'm just going to pause the recording, I guess. Mm-hmm. Do you know if I can pause the...
You can pause, yeah. There should be an option there to pause.
I just see... I actually just see stop recording, not pause.
You should, but you know what, actually, Adriana, if you stop it, because when people come back, they'll be more inclined to talk.